Noting the time and the presence of a quorum, I call this meeting of the Acton Finance Committee to order. Please note we have one remote participant, Mr. Jarbo, who will necessitate a roll call vote for all votes taken today. Also, please note that this meeting is being recorded by ActonTV. Anyone else who wishes to record, including the only person in the audience, if they wish to record, they have to make themselves known to the chair now. At this time, we will start with citizens' concerns. Seeing no other citizens standing, I do see one citizen who happens to be a member of the committee who wishes to speak as a citizen. So I defer to you, Christi Andersen.
Hi, Christi Andersen, 460 Main Street. I'm here speaking purely as a citizen. I am very concerned about the massive increase I saw in my water bill, which we attempted to have considered as part of our overall budget negotiations last year, but we're not really entirely. I used less water than ever and had a $50 increase in my quarterly bill. And I am very worried about the Habitat for All coming up. I know we're not supposed to talk about how much it costs to have families in town, but frankly, it costs a ton of money. And with my current tax bill and the rate at which we've been going up, I am actually seriously considering my retirement not being in town. I had wanted to stay here forever, but it's at the point where I don't know that that is going to be financially possible. You had also mentioned previously, Mr. Chair, that you did not see signs under people's houses right after graduation. I got a lovely home for sale, congratulations, graduate sign through the back roads that I take. I know a number of parents who are leaving. I know this falls unfairly burden on our non-parent generation. I can also tell you that 3 houses here in town center on my block sold recently, all to families with either young or soon-to-be children here. You have a lot of people who are leaving. One of our neighbors grew up in town on Wood Lane. His grandparents built his house in the 1920s. He bought it. Yes, it was $1 million property, but he sure couldn't afford on his fireman's pension to maintain that over town. So at some point, we do have a decision that people need to make as residents about whether they can continue affording to live here. I'd like that to be a focus of this committee going forward and brought to other committees, because I think we are reaching a tipping point, especially with Habitat for All. We don't have a commercial base to support a large increase in a residential base. I recognize that it is a good thing to do, but I don't think that I can personally afford it.
Thank you. I suspect this is going to be a wonderfully spirited year. Now, seeing no other members of the public standing for citizens' concern, I will yield the floor to committee member Christi Andersen to discuss the cost-cutting task force, and if you would be kind enough to also mention and incorporate what we've heard from the school district in the last 10 days, namely that they have something going on.
I actually would like to start there with the school district. They have a budget task force, I believe is the phrase they are using for it right now, that will be presented to the broad school committee on the 22nd. I will be able to discuss that at our next meeting. The one committee member I spoke to is very hopeful that this will create some significant change going forward in their budget. That segues nicely into the next point of discussion I want to have is whether we would like to wait to see what the school is doing before we set up our own subcommittee. We're in a little bit of a bind here in that there has been a longstanding ALG recognition that the budgets will be split between town and school 66-33. So any money that we save on the town side could be reallocated to something else, potentially better uses in the budget, but presumably will not actually be savings to taxpayers. So we have the opportunity to wait and see whether the school we think will bring enough of a decrease that we could have a real discussion about decreases in the town budget. I would argue, somewhat pointedly, that the town budget part of the override this year was arguably in order to stay at the correct percentage relative to the schools who needed it more. I recognize that is not going to be a well-received opinion on the part of the select board. So unless we get significant savings from the school, I don't think we have a lot of room for significant savings from the town. That said, I think there's a good argument that can be made that for the sake of the taxpayers, we have an opportunity here to examine how our taxes are being spent, the programs they're being used on, and have a true discussion, as they were told we would have, about whether the direction the town is going in its expenses are where we as a general community would like it to be. There's been a lot of discussion leading up to now about Acton 2020, a next master plan. So here's a chance at least to have a public discussion about it. Given how we feel about all of that, we can then get into a conversation about who should take the lead on various what's in the makeup of the committee. But first, I would love to hear what people think about whether we want to wait to see where the school gets, if it is useful having our own town focused. Jason.
I would posit that it's best that we have our own and that we not wait, for the simple reason of whoever strikes first is going to have the maximum amount of credibility. So if you sit back and wait, then this bus is going to be driven entirely by the school district, especially considering there's been no similar movement that I've seen. Maybe there has, but I haven't seen it on the municipal side. So we were the ones that were asked for this as one of the rungs of keeping the stool of the override upright. I think if this is something that we believe we should do, and I do believe we should do it, I don't believe we should wait. I believe we should have our own thing and have it be informed by what the other entities are doing. If it turns out that there is one effort that is swinging in the right direction for everybody, then we can coalesce around it. But in the meantime, absent there being three separate efforts. So this is something that we should at least be spearheading until we see something better. That's my opinion, but I will be happy to go around the table. Does anyone else wish to speak? I saw that Greg raised his hand. Is there anyone at the table who wishes to speak first?
2 seconds.
Scott?
I would agree with Jason. I would probably my rationale is, I feel like last year we got into a time crunch with analysis, and I feel like if we're waiting for analysis from another team, regardless of what team it is, and we don't start our own, I think we might find ourselves in another time crunch. And this is not going to be something that is going to be very simple to go through. And I think the more time we have to look at it, the better off we are. And then if we get to a point with it where and the other team has something, then we can compare notes and might be a more constructive conversation.
Sure. How many teams are we talking about?
On what context? We're talking currently about the school committee having their own budget task force and then us having one.
And has the select board come up with anything?
Not that I've heard of.
Okay.
I have other discussions about the structure.
As far as your comment about the ALG split, yes, it has usually come in around 66-33. It's been 15 years since we had an absolute split agreement, but consensus is usually built around that. Each ALG makes up its own rules, so there's nothing that's cast in concrete about that split.
Okay, because it was cited last year by some members of the select board that was writ in law.
It is not.
I don't mean literally written law, but that needed to be maintained. That is a larger discussion to have if we choose to.
In rough terms, yes. Every year, no. There was a time, if you go back 20 years, then yeah, that we argued over tenths of percentage points to determine the split. Once the split was determined, that was it.
Now, you mentioned at the previous meeting that there were other towns that spent a lower percentage of their overall budget on education. Could you please get us those numbers? Do you have them with you?
Let me see. I don't throw anything out. I do, actually.
Good.
I usually wait a year. Let's see.
Would you like me to go, Greg? while you look it up?
So part of my logic here is that from Keep Acton affordable members to whom I've spoken have had a very strong sense that the town does much more for families than they do for the seniors. And services, et cetera, that I've pushed back against as potential savings have been received as a heck no. That's something we actually get out of our taxes.
I mean, percentage-wise, yeah, the year I was doing this, it was 65.9 here. Like Bedford was 45, Boxborough was 56, Carlisle was 62, Littleton was 48, Maynard was 47, Sudbury was 65, Westford was 57, and yeah, so.
And I would, if I may, I would caution that before we look at those numbers in a vacuum, we'd want to have a closer look at the demographics of the towns. We as a town have a significantly larger percentage of the population that is school-aged.
I think also, I suspect some of those towns have significantly larger commercial bases than we
That's
do.
true, too. So it's not something that we can look at in a vacuum.
Demographically, Sudbury's probably as close to us as you'll find, and their percentage was about the same.
Okay. Greg did have his hand raised, and he's been patiently waiting, so I'm going to send it to Greg now.
Thank you. First of all, I agree that the sooner we can be engaged, the better. It is my understanding, though, in talking to at least one member of the Regional School Committee, who I think, but this could be guesswork, may be the same one that Christi talked to, because she just got back from a trip. But anyway, she normally is a reliable source and has good data. And what she indicated to me when I talked to her yesterday afternoon was that the task force that the school committee is in the process of putting together will include members, or at least a member of the finance committee. So, the good news is, yes, I agree with you. I think we may discover that the school committee may also agree with us. So, in general, whether they do or they don't, we should, move forward. But this may not be an adversarial situation. It appears that they are planning serious review, and they do, at least based on the one person I talked to, intend to include us.
Thank you. One second here. Any other thoughts about going forward?
Yeah, one other, and again, I can wait until the end, but it seems like it fits here. When it comes to cost cutting, one of the things that we do, and I think is necessary, is try to compare ourselves to comparable communities. And it turns out, I believe, that the select board has one set of comparables and the school committee has a different set of comparables. And so the reason I was talking to the member of the school committee yesterday was to say, is there data where I can get my arms around all of the communities that both sides use to see if somebody is cherry picking? She shared that. I will share it with this group at the end of the meeting. I'll just forward it. But there are the communities around us that we know, but comparing ourselves to Maynard seems not like a comparable community. Their industrial base or commercial base is bigger than ours. Comparing ourselves, on the other hand, to Concord or Sudbury do seem appropriate, or even to Westford. That seems right, but it also turns out that the school committee looks at several other communities when they try to consider their comparable. So we should, somewhere in this process, find a way, if we're going to use different data in different circumstances, why?
So
And,
I'd like to jump in here and say, we don't necessarily need to worry about choosing the wrong data from different areas if we're looking at an absolute set. So rather than compare ourselves to all these other communities and potentially have ourselves a race to the bottom, I would much prefer we take an absolute look at whether we absolutely need to have this thing or not. So I'm less interested I'm less interested in trying to boil the ocean of 15 comparable communities around us versus saying that we as a committee have stated that 8% tax increases every couple of years is intolerable and we have to do something better.
Jason, you and I are agreeing without sounding like we're agreeing. So,
Well,
you know,
can I try to
comparables
say, Greg?
comparables
Greg.
we are not trying to be like
Greg.
other communities. Sorry.
Go ahead and finish, Greg. Go ahead and finish, Greg.
You said this was my section. Go ahead, Greg, please.
Sorry. We are not trying to become like other towns to the extent that they can highlight something like percentage of students in the population. The only way you get that insight is by some form of comparison. But yes, we're not trying to become somebody else, but to the extent that we can realize that we're underperforming in some areas or overperforming in others, you know, that sounds like a subjective opinion until you can bring data to the table, and often the data that we bring is some set of comparables.
Okay.
And we should know when and why we use them. So that's all I'm saying.
Okay, Christi?
The school budget presentation includes a bunch of lines from various DESI reports about how we perform and spend on various categories compared to other towns. I'd like to see how that lines up with the town's percentage of budgets spent on education. That said, I believe that falls towards the school committee side of the discussion, not what we will be focused on, which is going to be mostly town services, in my envisioning.
It's got to be both. Our cost cutting has to look at both. It doesn't mean it has to come down in the 1/3, 2/3 model. It does not mean that in any way, shape, or form. But we have to look, since we get one tax bill, we have to look at everything holistically. We cannot just look at one side, not the other.
I think we run a risk. I hear why you're saying that. I think we run a risk of people saying purely, the school is working on cutting, or the school needs to cut, and we don't need to look at anything else, if we take it by that stance.
It's part of the reason why I don't want to just wait for the school committee side. I want us to do our own and see if the select board wants to join in or let this be done, or have the municipal side join in, or have it be presented to them after the fact.
I worry that this will be the school is cutting this much money, therefore we don't need to do anything. And I think we need a significant public discussion. Okay?
I firmly believe that this committee will not allow that to happen.
All right. Next up, thought it would be useful to talk about the goals of doing this cost cutting. My first is actually having a community discussion about the services we provide and the amount of money we spend on them, why we do, et cetera. Give people a chance to talk about what they use and don't use. Kind of give us a reset on a better understanding. We all have our pet projects, et cetera, our things we think should and shouldn't be there. I think it'd be good to give people an opportunity, especially given how close the most recent vote was about it. And I can tell you, I know people who voted for the override who did it because they saw no other way. That doesn't mean that the town is on a good trajectory, going forward. So I would, in support of that, recommend that we have some public listening sessions or public forums.
I'm all for that. My question is, how do you correct for the squeaky wheel scenario where we have a public forum and we get 6 people that show up?
That's always the issue. I think a lot of our projects go past because the select board hears from a few loud people about why they want something and not the broader community. So it's something that needs to be worked on. I suspect part of it is having multiple public forums. We get it in the town newsletter that goes out, and we encourage the select board and other groups to promote it. Steve?
You can certainly do a public forum. It's been done before. You can also do a survey.
Yeah.
When we were doing the town meeting improvement committee, we put out a survey. And we got a fair amount of feedback, more than would show up at a
Yeah.
public forum, because we also had public forums. So that would be something we should consider doing.
Greg, did you have your hand up?
I did, but all I can say is I agree. I believe that there's perhaps a two-step process. Any investigation like this should start with surfacing the right questions to ask in a survey, and that's done as qualitative research, and then you can follow that up with a quantitative study that basically says, okay, if we have to make trade-offs, would you rather have X or Y? And that's where the quantitative data becomes helpful. So I think both paths can be used, but I would sequence the public input as a way of making sure we're asking the right questions.
Did you want to say something? Okay. I would recommend that we also consider doing something like a roadshow, although the roadshows I know are more selling something. Get out in front of Lions Club, Rotary Club, Senior Center, et cetera, like we used to do for the POV, just to get as much community feedback as we can. We can also leverage the Keep Acton Affordable and the Together for Acton group infrastructures to hopefully get feedback from people who care significantly about this. One second, I lost my page. I do think we want to have a larger conversation potentially after these discussions about whether we want to maintain that 66-33 split. That would not, there is no way to get that negotiated, I believe, in this budget year, to have a change negotiated in there. But if it came out of this, that could be a medium to long-term change we want to see, which segues into the idea that I think we want to view this as short-term, medium-term, and long-term changes that can be made. Maybe we will find that there are not any for certain budgets. Part of my theory is that we want to get people believing in government, that we are actually listening, that changes can be made, or being enough a part of it that they decide that the way the government is spending the money right now is how they want it to be. But just promoting general belief in the democratic process that we have here. Now, we are not elected officials, so that puts us in a interesting position relative to all of this. It's a chance for us to promote the system and encourage people to be involved in it without us being beholden to specific decisions that they make. Does the short, medium, long-term timeframe, I figure that'll come out of the actual subcommittee, how we want to divide that up, et cetera. That might be getting it far ahead.
I think you've had a preview of the point of view.
I came up with this before that. Yes.
Any areas that are off limits?
Any what?
Any areas that are off limits?
Not for me personally.
Many of our employees are members of collective bargaining units that have contracts that extend
Yes.
at maximum 3 years.
Which to me
So-
is not specifically off limits, but it is a constraint to work within.
Okay.
So that would just be a part of the discussion. I wouldn't say like we can't touch X department or Y department.
Okay.
That said, I do not, having interacted some with the current town manager, we're going to get a lot of pushback if we try to get our fingers in how the town specifically does things. So just something for us to keep awareness
Understood.
of. Adam?
Yeah, I just want to say that feel like we're tilting at windmills to try to go line item by line item through the budgets
Oh,
to look for
yes.
savings. But I think we're also being obtuse if we're just talking about who gets how much of what split of an increase. I think it's really the FinCom's role to give more guidance on the entire budget can increase X over the next 3 years, 5 years, whatever, such that we don't overrun the override that we just approved. And then I think it's up to the budgeting entities to come back to us with how they fit within that budget and how they divvy up that budget.
I 80% to 90% disagree with that. I hear where you're coming from. However, having spent a lot of time thinking specifically about this, it is our role to ensure the long-term financial stability of the town, and how that money is spent specifically ties into that. I agree. We should not be going line by line in the budgets. We should not be caring about how a specific department is run. That said, if we decide that we're putting not enough money into maintenance, and the town needs to figure somewhere to cut that money back from to put it into maintenance, that is something we need to be discussing. So I do not think we should be micromanaging or even managing the town, but there does need to be ability for us to do a larger strategic pushback on how the money is being spent at that level. Does that fit in with what you were saying?
Yeah, I see that, I guess, more from a they present what they want to cut, and then we either approve or disapprove. But I guess the role that we're all stepping into here is to come to them with, these are services we want you to keep no matter what, or these are services we'd like you to look at cutting. And that's sort of where we're heading, right?
Ish. I would like that to be in the context of public forums, public support. That it is not us sitting there with our specific projects that we like or don't like based on our personal feelings, but that it comes out of discussions with the public and has public backing one way or another.
But at the end, we do still have to make recommendations.
Yes.
We can't leave the analysis of the survey and the public forums to the other entities. We have to be the ones to say, this is our recommendation. And we have the forums and the survey to back it up, but these are the recommendations that we have, and these are the things we would very much like to see you start executing against.
I agree with that. I just want to be clear that we're on the same page of, in my mind, that is not, some department needs one fewer assistant, et cetera.
I don't think we're going to get that granular.
Yeah, okay. So I'm viewing it more as a higher strategic level that we're moving towards. It sounds like we are on the same page with that. My recommendation for a team, or I'd like to discuss rather, team makeup. I assume we would like at least a member of the school committee. My suggestion is that we have it be one. While they are a large part of our budget, they're doing largely their own thing, so they could feed this broader discussion back in. They also will have it fed back in some from ALG. I presume this will be at least tangentially in the ALG process.
More than tangential.
Wonderful. We will need select board member. We need to decide whether we want one or more. Okay. And then we come to an interesting question of how many FinCom members.
One, I don't want a committee of 20. I want it to be, I would prefer it be as nimble as possible,
I'm going to challenge you.
okay?
My recommendation is 3. One short-term, one medium-term, one long-term, project focus. One for each of the buckets.
You do that, then you have to have open meeting law. You're a subcommittee of
We
the
have-
finance committee.
We have open meeting law when we have a committee with this.
That's true too.
We will have to have a clerk.
That's
We will
true,
have
too.
to take minutes, et cetera, for this committee.
That's true. Okay,
The reasoning behind my recommendation is that FinCom members know who to talk to get what done, and having someone focused on the different timeframes will, if nothing else, provide some continuity going forward.
are you at all concerned that it's going to be seen as stacking the deck with 3 members of the finance committee, 1 member of the school committee, 1 member of the select board?
I am open to more members of the select board. I do not see any problem with there being only one member of the school committee. As I said, they're only somewhat connected.
Yeah, I hate to say I'm actually worried about the optics of it. I'm worried about being seen as being imbalanced.
I think there's a discussion that needs to be had around expenses that isn't happening through another forum. If the select board wanted to take the lead on this, I'd be happy to. Let them do it, but I think at the end,
Yeah.
it's going to be a question in part of analysis. How many people do we have on FinCom to help out with things and track down various
That's fair.
aspects?
That's fair. Before we settle on this number, how many other seats, how many other stakeholders are you looking at?
Well, the next question is the public and how many?
And what's your proposal?
I don't have a strong one. I would like to get a mix of seniors, family representation, keep Acton affordable members type. I mean, that against the override, for the override, and I don't know how many. I mean, I'm happy to discuss the various demographics and try to get representation. Scott?
Just a suggestion, as you're structuring this for the one school committee member and the one proposed ALG member, could you?
I'm sorry, select board, not ALG.
Select board member, sorry. One select board member, could you say, instead of saying we want one of each, could you say at least one and leave it to them, how many they want to assign? Because then that way, to get to Jason's concern about optics, if they know there are 3 FinCom members, they can send 3 school committee members or 3 select board members if they want to have more weight, but if they don't deem that necessary, they can send 1. Would that
Thoughts?
work?
Greg, did you want to say something?
Yeah, we also have committees of different sizes, so when you start sending more than one member of the select board, there's only 5 of them, and so they get to their open meeting law limit pretty quick. So again, we have the bigger committee. We could certainly have more than one, but, unless you want to make all of these public meetings.
Well, they will be.
Yeah, well, if they're then public meetings, then no problem whatsoever.
I
Then
think if nothing
the
else, they
second
need.
question,
Go ahead.
sorry, I had a second question.
Yes.
I'm for taking the lead on this one because that's our charter, that's what we're supposed to be doing. To what extent are we complementing, supplementing, conflicting with what the ALG does?
The ALG is about the broader budgeting process. And as our town manager would like to point out often in the ALG meetings, it is not about specific expenses. This is a discussion about specific expenses and, I'd say more broadly, expense strategy. Steve?
Yeah, if I may, in my experience, ALG seldom gives more than about a half hour's thought to anything beyond the budget year. So anything that we talk about in terms of an intermediate or long-term, impact is way out of the ALG, at least their past scope.
Jason?
And therefore it would fit well in this. This would be complementary, but definitely not in lieu of ALG in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. By rough back of a speech calculation here, I've already got the committee at 15 people. And I'm not sure that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 13 people. I'm not sure that's where you want it to be. So what I've got, and you're welcome to tell me if I'm overrepresenting or underrepresenting anything. If we have a FinCom member, a select board member, a school committee member, we probably need to offer up a town staff slot, a school staff slot. And then if we get 2 renters, 2 parents, 2 retirees, and 2 business owners, first of all, have we hit all the major categories in town? And that's 13 people, and that's a pretty big
You
subcommittee.
have 2 renters, 2 retirees, and 2 business owners?
Two renters, 2 parents,
2 parents.
2 retirees,
Okay.
2 business owners, and then the individuals aforementioned. So that's a committee of 13, which gets to be a little on the large side. But first thing is, is it properly representative? Is that would that represent the stakeholders that you are looking to reach?
On the theory that I am running this, I am comfortable that I can run a committee of 13.
Oh, you'd be running this, yes.
Yes. I am not sure that that has all of the expertise required, which is why I would love to add 2 more FinCom members in. So it could be broken into subcommittees, although subcommittees become their own pain in the neck because of OML. So maybe that's not the way to do it.
I'm willing to wait on the 1 versus 3 FinCom members until next time, but, since we should never make a single decision in a single meeting, with your permission, I would like to recommend that anyone come back with any other stakeholder
Yeah.
by our next meeting. Especially if somebody thinks I'm missing a specific category. By all means, please bring that
Yes, please.
at the next meeting.
Am I just running your list from 2 business owners to?
Two renters, 2 parents, 2 retirees, 2 business owners, a FinCom representative or 3, a select board representative, a school committee representative, a town professional staff representative, and a school professional staff representative. Marianne, you wanted to say something?
That was my question. I just was trying to count, and so the 2 renters, the 2 retirees, 2 parents, 2 business owners, town representative, school committee, select board, FinCom, and subject upon that Mr. Sullivan's suggestion of at least 1, but right now we're at 13. And come back at the next meeting with comments. Thank you.
Christi, I would definitely ask you to be the one to run this, because you've been spearheading it. So,
Well, like I said, I'm happy to run a committee of that size, but I would not necessarily sign. I would not insist someone else sign up for that.
fair enough. Is there anything else that you need for this?
Steve?
Whether it's 1 or 3 FinCom members, 3 may be too many, but 1's too few.
That's what I was just.
Especially if Christie's going to run it.
Yeah.
Somebody has to do the work, because running a committee of 13
Yeah.
is a big job.
That said, do we care that it, yes, we do. It should be an odd number. We can figure that out then. Let me check here. We had discussed in our previous forever ago meeting about looking at what I think of as one-time revenue sources, selling property that is not used or underused, et cetera. I recommend that that be a different process, that that not be a part of this. This is, as I'm thinking about it, looking at the expenses and one-time property is, or, I mean, ideally, it'd be great if we found other sources of revenue, but not one time.
Scott, how do you feel about that? You were the one that mentioned it most, that needed to be taken into consideration. How do you feel about being a separate process, or are you worried about being lost?
Well, if you're looking at expense savings, you could look at revenue as its own tranche, and that could be a part of revenue, even though it's one-time events. And then, I don't know.
I don't want to stand up a separate entity just for the revenue side. Is the revenue side something that we can incorporate as part of the overall committee as the year goes on?
I'm inclined to leave it out in that the focus of this being as much of a public participation. I think it's easier to focus the public participation on what are the expenses that we have, what are the programs we want to maintain, et cetera, versus people trying to figure out a way to make more money for the town.
Fair enough. Would it make sense for there to be, as a separate thing, a liaison directly to the town because this is strictly municipal side. There's nothing on the school side that we can sell. Because we'd have to get both communities to agree to it. So how would you feel about a liaison or part of the liaison to the town side, having that as part of their responsibility as the liaison? Does that work for you, Scott? Because then it comes back to the overall committee and is not part of the cost-cutting committee.
I think we have some input.
I would focus this committee only on costs. I would not try and liaise or coordinate or anything else on the revenue side. Adam suggested, and I agree, that we put Dave Wellinghoff on the revenue side as a committee of one.
Unless you wanted it, Scott. This is what happens when Dave doesn't show up to the meetings.
Yeah.
You can thank Adam for that, but.
He has over the years been a very strong advocate
Yes.
of looking at this.
I remember him discussing this strongly.
I will approach him and see if he's willing to take that on during this year.
That is it for what I have. I can report back next time about what happens with the school committee, budget task force, and write up more formally where I think we've gotten with this today. Does it sound good?
Can I just ask one clarification? Christi, you had mentioned that the school committee will be coming forward with their plan for their budget task force on August 22nd, is that
Yes.
correct? Who are they going to on August 22nd?
The school committee.
The school committee, thank you.
Yes, they have a proposal, and the school committee will be ideally approving it, and then can move forward.
Okay, thank you.
Well, so that's the charge and the composition is on the 22nd.
Yes.
And then they're going to, by the end of the month, they're going to send out their requests for who's interested. We might want to try and, assuming we can do get our draft in place on the 22nd as well, then we'd probably want to piggyback on their outreach for what we're doing. But we'd have to send it out through the municipal side.
Okay,
Very good.
thank you. I believe I'm done with my,
Okay, thank you. I, of course, stopped sharing because I didn't want to share my email, so now I got to go back to sharing. The good news is I don't expect to lose connectivity every 5 minutes this time like I did last time. Just give me 30 seconds to get in here. Believe it or not, I'm getting better at this. I apologize for getting the 2.0 draft out as late as I did. I do appreciate those of you who've already read it and sent their corrections. Even something as small as typos are great to have them caught. That does not necessarily mean I incorporated all the changes into the slide deck between yesterday and today. So please bear with me. Okay, so this is the second go-around. This was formerly the Steve Happy slide. So the paragraph I have on this one is that the volunteers of Acton's Finance Committee are all rightfully proud to be part of a community that values education, responsive government, and a level playing field for business and personal growth. While it is easy to focus on items that we would like to see changed, it is always a good idea to review what is working before discussing what should be enhanced. The most common measurements of financial health continue to show great strength: on-time tax payment rates, our cost of borrowing credit rating, and the other post-employment benefit balance compared to other towns are all excellent. Our school district is consistently among the best in the state, and our municipal finance department has received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for more than a decade. Paired with our proximity to world-class higher education, a myriad of industry-leading companies in multiple different markets, and our access to both highways, interstates, and a commuter rail station, There is little doubt why many of us have been attracted to Acton and have chosen to invest in it by way of becoming citizens, residents, business owners, or homeowners. We appreciate what has been done before us to create this community, and we look to the future with a responsibility to only improve on what are already our attractive traits. Did I come with the optimism and the sunshine for a change?
Yes, you did.
Excellent. Took me days to write that paragraph.
We'll see how the rest of it goes.
Kudos.
That's all there is, Steve. That's all there is.
It's all the happy talk.
Oh, no. Jason?
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I'll send you, most of the edits that I have are what I'm going to call cosmetic. So AAA to a lot of people means the American Automobile Association. So, little things like that's a AAA bond rating, little things like that. So I'll send those to you on the side. But my basic comment is, I looked through this and I was really impressed with the progress between version 1.0 and 2.0. Yeah, all I'm going to be suggesting are a few minor tweaks that, make it easy for our target audience, which isn't the boards, the select board or the school committee, but for the slides, I think if I remember correctly, this is for the public consumption. And they might look at a AAA and not know which AAA we're talking about.
Fair enough. All for making it easier to understand. Go ahead, Christi.
I recommend we take out the OPEB line. Very few people will know what that is. If you think it's important to the general public, I would include something about how that is an OPEB liability that we are retiring and figure out a short way to say that. But I think
I think a line needs to be in there because I call back to it in slide 5. So, but changing the verbiage, I'm all for.
Okay. Yes,
Absolutely.
I had to even think about what it says when just reading the phrase proven OPEB performance is not very meaningful to me.
Okay. It has become a cliche that past performance is not indicative of future results, so we have a lot to be proud of. We must be vigilant to protect a future town that would be recognizable to us. Last year's override passed by an extremely thin margin. 0.5% made the difference between funding what both school committee and select board members said was an already difficult budget and what many people predicted would have been catastrophic, destructive cuts in services. Such a narrow avoidance of calamity must be taken into account and given the respect it deserves as we plan for the current budget conversation as well as the near and longer-term budget expectations. For the last couple of years, capital and operating seem to be treated as two independent topics, yet it is imperative to remember that the homeowner only receives one tax bill. While it is impossible to live within Prop 2.5 for both capital and operating costs, when a large debt exclusion is added to the tax bill, then there should absolutely be some acknowledgement and allowance in the operating budget to lessen any given year's tax increase. We added the Boardwalk campus and the North Acton Fire Station at record low borrowing rates, and did so fully aware that we were raising the portion of the tax burden that covers long-term debt to recent highs. It was made clear to the public that this was meant to be a relatively short-term burden. And indeed, the graph of debt payments, which will either be small on this slide or will be the immediate next slide. I need to make that change. And indeed, the graph of debt payments shows that as some of the oldest debt was retired, we would return to similar debt costs. These projects had an outsized impact on taxes starting in FY21 and will carry with us for decades to come. There is no appetite for adding to excluded debt until we have fully returned to more modest levels, which will not be before fiscal year 29. Even then, rates will need to be taken into account, and when large projects begin, the operating budget amount and reserve use amount should be carefully used to smooth out the increase in the tax bill. Regarding reserves, free cash at last certification was above the FinCom recommendation of a 5% ceiling. That is projected to be about 3.4% at the end of this current FY25, barring an inability to have the projected 1% turnback. I need to clean that up. After fiscal year 26, free cash is projected to be below the floor. This will hinder the ability for free cash to smooth over any debt exclusion or even just plug an operating budget deficit. Last year's override provided for $1.2 million in unused tax levy capacity. This is the largest unused tax levy capacity we've had in more than 15 years, possibly longer. I just didn't have enough data. So we have provided a buffer of significant size to prepare against the future. It has also adjusted the basis up by $6.6 million. While only $5.4 million was used in the first year, that still resulted in an 8.4% increase in the average single-family tax bill. In fact, since FY18, average single-family tax bill is up 38%, whereas CPI-adjusted inflation is 28%. The cost of our government is outpacing inflation. I have not forgotten that I was going to put in 2 or 3 more lines under that tax increase to show 1 year, 4 year, 7 year, 10 year. And honestly, if you guys showed up early, you saw me digging up previous year's ALG spreadsheets. I'm trying to make sure I have that data. So put a pin in that last comment. I'm not just going to have the one data point on it. So before I move off of this slide, since this is by far the biggest, most important slide in the presentation, how does everyone feel about my no debt overrides until fiscal year 29? I got one thumbs up over there, one over here. I got a thumbs down. Okay, that always makes it interesting. Scott's a thumbs up. Greg, what say you? Thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Okay.
Jason, I just wanted to qualify that my thumbs up comes with a good luck.
Yes, that's an aspirational thumbs up. That's my understanding. Okay, Mr. Noon, since you find yourself in my normal position, would you care to comment?
I wouldn't put a year on it. What's magic about 29?
So what's magic about 29, and this is where I do have to have the chart. This is where 29 is where all of the 2 recent, 3, if you include the the gift that keeps on giving in the form of Minuteman Regional Vocational Technical High School, when the debt from the most recent round is retired and we are back to more or less the level we were at before we did the most recent large round, which we knew was a large round, but we were taking advantage of historically low rates and taking care of 3 schools worth of problem at once. Did the FY29 not come, did the explanation for that not come through because they didn't have the chart?
Yeah, well, but I still think it's easier to, rather than pick a year, which sounds like you have great prognostication capacity, you just say until the debt level, the excluded debt level falls back to where it was in
FY15,
FY15, yeah.
okay,
Which will be 2029.
which would be fiscal year 2029.
It seems to come out of the air.
Okay, so if I say it that way, and then you'd be okay with me saying, which we strongly believe will be in FY 2029. Okay, so that's a wordsmithing thing, I'll make that happen. Christi?
You mentioned the 1.2 million of untaxed levy capacity. The ALG model that was printed in the warrant, and that is the most recent model, actually includes 400,000 of untaxed levy capacity being used next year, or in the upcoming fiscal year.
In fiscal year 26.
So I'm a little worried that that could be perceived as being misleading. I know we don't want to
Wait,
get,
wait.
it's not a place for a nuance.
I'm sorry, did you say that 400,000 is being used in FY 25?
No,
It's being used in FY
in FY
26,
26,
which is what the year that we're talking about.
yes,
So entering into this year,
okay.
we have a $1.2 million unused tax levy capacity.
Your
That's correct.
reserve projections are based on using that also. That you discussed?
Correct.
Now, I mean, it clearly has not been agreed to be used, but maybe this is just getting into the weeds and does not need to be discussed at this level.
What I'm hearing, and you're correct about, what I'm hearing is that I have not properly fenced this as forecasted or budgeted when I make my comments about free cash. So I will drive that home. I will try and wordsmith that and drive it home a little more closely to reflect that. Now, another thing that I'm purposely trying to do is I'm purposely not trying to read off of the slides. So the paragraphs that I'm reading out loud are meant to augment what's written on the slide. And that you'll see, I even try and pull out clip art in the near future, just because apparently people are visual, unlike some of us who just want the words. Okay.
It did occur to me after reading this that what you've done is you've taken 20 slides and put that much information on 10.
Oh, I got it down to eight slides of value, just because that's how I like it. Okay.
He was given a goal, and he achieved it.
Okay. Okay. So how does all of this inform our current budget conversations for fiscal year '26? It shows that business as usual find us back in need of another operating override much more frequently than this past time around. We do not believe that another override would be successful, but we are aware of the fact that we are budgetarily restrained by existing costs. So much of the revenue increase allowed under Prop 2.5 is already spoken for through existing compensation contracts and raises that leave this. So much of the revenue increase allowed under Prop 2.5 is already spoken for through existing compensation contracts and raises, and that leaves practically nothing left. We have negotiated more in unused tax levy capacity that is meant to be a transitionary buffer, not merely a postponement of the next override. We have to wait until fiscal year '29 for any new debt exclusion. We have to wait for debt levels to fall back to where they were in FY15 for any new debt exclusion, currently expected to be on or around fiscal year '29. It is far better to realize what is on the horizon and plan for it now than to have blind faith in future success. Go ahead.
Sorry.
Again, with the 1.2 million, this seems like a good place to clarify, depending on how you want to handle that, because it's not entirely 1.2, or maybe it is.
So the immediate decision is what to do with that 1.2 million.
Okay.
That is the present day, that is what the number is when we hit July 1.
I would redo the wording a little here, where you say use of it makes the average tax bill rise faster than traditional 3%. Inclined to say that it allows the tax bill to increase more than the traditional 3% without a vote, because everyone just went through a vote to let it increase more.
Good point.
I have another point also.
Go ahead.
Bending the tax curve, I think could be said more simply as lay the groundwork now for lower tax increases. Bending the curve is a engineering talk. And that's not our audience, or the sole members of our audience.
You could also say laying the groundwork to match our revenue and our expense growth. But I also had a point on the first, business as usual, 3 to 3.5% is revenue growth, cost growth? What is
Just a
it?
second. Lay the groundwork now to balance.
Yeah.
Revenue and expenses. Back to the teeter-totter at the top of the screen. Business as usual, 3% revenue increase.
Okay.
Anybody else have comments on this slide? Okay, this is where, okay. The next couple of slides do not have as much verbiage done because I ran out of gas.
Sorry, can you back up one? For the bottom budget, I still don't love the idea there. What we're hoping to lay the groundwork for is minimizing tax increases. Can we just say it that way? I mean, that's what you're getting out of balancing revenues and expenses.
Yep. The near future is the planning phase, and I believe that we should all take a pause on all new initiatives while we stop and plan. Public communication between the municipal and school district side is required to see a single plan for capital. Revenue options, not just cost savings, should also be included and discussed, to your point. We need to change our trajectory, and we should be able to do it in the next 3 years. So what I'm trying to get across here is we absolutely have to come up with a budget right away. And we have to make decisions, are we going to tax to 3% this year? Are we going to use any of the tax levy? Are we going to have a debt exclusion? Those all have to be discussed right now. And right now, this year, we have to have the outreach and the communication to identify the cost-cutting options. The near term, the planning term, the next 2 or 3 years, 2 to 5 years, is actually executing against those things that we have just discussed. Go ahead.
Should we put periods on that? Near future being how many years?
2 to 5.
Immediate, I understand. Near future and longer term are a little amorphous.
I'd go with 3 to 5 years because that's consistent with what you have in other parts of the presentation. Fine.
Did I skip a slide? There you go.
Be consistent.
I'll be consistent, but my view on this is we have to put the FY budget to bed. In so doing, we also have to we have to have a very clear discussion of what we're going to do over the next 2 to 5 years. And then elected terms are 3 years. Leadership contracts are also relatively short-term. Collective bargaining agreements are usually 3 years as well. At the Finance Committee, we are tasked to take a much longer-term approach. We are fully aware that long-term financial planning is just slightly more accurate than gazing into a crystal ball, but any decision in the short term absolutely has bearing on the longer-term nature of our town. Consider the 5+ year forecast more of a mission statement of what we wish the town to be. And honestly, that's where I completely ran out of gas. So from there, I'm going to try and put on more verbiage around what I'm trying to what I'm trying to drive home on this vision statement. We need to grow to a plan and not to a happenstance. And the last year's zoning change without any analysis continues to stick in my craw. And so I want to make sure that we have it in our point of view that that is not something we ever want to see again. And I honestly could not figure out a polite way of saying it, so I put the keyboard down at that time. So I'm going to work on it again. But in the call and response with the opening statement, as a town, we do absolutely value academic success. But we also want to make sure we're able to do it in a way that does not bankrupt the citizenry. We would like to maintain those things that made the town attractive to move to. When was the last time you said to anyone, why'd you move to Acton? And you got an answer other than the school district first. And the fact that I was able to afford a large enough house, but I had to go this far out of the city to get there. My concern is if we do not have a vision statement in a relatively short number of years, especially if we have the Habitat for All zoning and potentially even just under the MBTA zoning, because there's been no there's no analysis at all of what that's going to do to the town. I am definitely concerned about the future success of this town and our ability to provide the services that we'd wanted and that made this town attractive to us to move to in the first place. Greg, I'm going to let you go first because I saw your hand before I saw Christie's.
No, I'll go after Christie, but, whatever. I'll go now. I took a little effort to wordsmith the last year's zoning change without analysis is never to be repeated. One of the lessons is, I understand you feel that. I also understand that the town voted 2-1 in order to pass it anyway. And so rather than argue with the will of town meeting, I think we're better off if we state the sooner and the better the data that we get, the better we can make informed decisions. So in other words, make it a positive statement rather than that's never going to happen again, because you basically look like you're fighting the last war, and we're not. We're looking forward. And so I think there's a way to wordsmith that. And I'll send you the edits, or if you want, I can do it off the top of my head. But the point is I think you find a way to put it in the future tense as opposed to telling the town they made a big mistake when they voted 2-1, because that's
In the future, I will never support an override if you don't do your analysis first.
You're only one vote here, buddy.
It will help the town make informed decisions if they have better data sooner.
I think that sounds like something that was in my speech.
Well, I think the question of master planning has come up, and we don't have one at the moment. We've got one that was approximately done in 2010. And it would be a valid critique to make that, yes, we're approving changes in zoning and other things without the benefit of having a current master plan.
Do you want that in the 2 to 5 year range?
It takes about 5 years to do a master plan in this town. But yes, I would actually.
Go ahead, Christi.
To Greg's point, I think we want to understand both taxpayer and environmental costs on zoning changes. Add a lot of houses, you suddenly have less permeable landscape. I recall a town meeting in which we spent at least 20 minutes discussing the Russian School of Math's desire to pave their lot in the back. And a lot of the concern was about creating impermeable landscaping there. I'm currently trying to talk to the Water District to understand their concerns, or lack thereof potentially, hopefully, about water availability, not infrastructure, given that the climate change has created environments in which we have large rainfalls that run off into the storm drains rather than refill our aquifers. And the town's answer that people can just make their own wells is not managing our water supply. That is simply giving more people the feeling that they can do whatever they want, i.e., drive by all the places that have water well in use signs when we're in a drought and they're throwing their sprinklers around. It's, unfortunately, the Water District is enough removed from the town structuring that it's not included in the plans. But I think there's a significant chance to bring to the public desires to support the environment and environmental resiliency, the fact that this planning needs to happen. Sorry if that was too many words.
Master plan in the 2 to 5 year range is going to be one of our asks.
I agree, and again, I'll report this at the end of the meeting, but it turns out the Economic Development Committee is also working to impact the master plan to begin being a little more business-friendly. So that's an effort that is underway, but that fits under that point, so I don't think you need to add anything here.
Steve?
Yeah, go back to the other slide if you would, Jason. The first bullet, I don't like bankrupting the citizenry, is a word, and then you make two comments, one of which is a fairly softball comment about the Acton Boxborough School District, and you hit the Minuteman School District pretty hard. As much as we think Minuteman needs to rein in their costs, it's $3 million out of a $113 million budget. They're not bankrupting the citizenry. So
But they're,
you're giving it, I think, more attention than it would deserve in this slide.
so I think this is the only place in the slide deck where Minuteman shows up.
No, you got to go to the next one, too.
Okay, so you don't like the word bankrupt, ensure economic, stop.
When I suspect your actual subject of topic there is the rate of growth of the Minuteman School District as opposed to its size, but.
And Jason, I think we probably only need one bullet on the Minuteman Regional Vocational Technical High School instead of two. I think you can combine both of those points into a single bullet. And again, you don't need to give it more shelf space than it deserves.
I'm also inclined to simply call it Minuteman Tech.
Yeah.
That said, I did have fun trying to figure out how one would pronounce.
That's the acronym, it's on all the stuff they sent.
Well, and we may understand it, but I'm not sure the voter or the citizen would, yeah. Minuteman, they know what we're talking about, but all those initials, it's like, what are they talking about?
I would like to believe that an acronym about Minuteman directly below an acronym about school districts would have been, under a category of academic success, would lead people to come up with the right one, but I can change it to Minuteman Tech.
Living in your own private Idaho.
Jason, you just added an N to the end of the word to. Get ton equilibrium.
You can burn out pretty fast.
Yeah, that's.
Okay. Okay.
find it's very easy when you're working on something like this to know exactly what you're talking about, writing and reading and understanding it, and then you show it to your spouse or your neighbor, and they're like, what does this all mean?
If I can't get my high school senior to understand it, I'm in trouble. Yeah, and he didn't have time to look at it today. Okay, concerns. These are our concerns for the next little bit. I personally, and I would like the sense of the committee, I think that if we were to try and come back with another operating override the next 2 or 3 years, I think it would fail. Okay, so that's not a, unless Greg disagrees with that statement, that's not a.
No, that was my way of showing agreement. Hold on, maybe there's a thumb here I can raise instead.
Middle finger, though.
Yes,
So-
I agree.
So first bullet point, surprisingly, is uncontroversial. Debt exclusions, I believe, are unaffordable at this time, and I laid out when I think we should come back to reviewing them. I put this on the slide knowing that this would most likely be the single greatest source of conflict between us and the select board this year. Judging that the select board has, as one of their short-term goals, bringing the DPW building to the next town meeting. Is this a battle we are prepared to join for fiscal year '26? I say yes, that's why I put it in here, but I'm curious for everyone else's feedback.
Well, I'm certainly not ready for another debt exclusion.
Good?
Yeah, somebody who's been fairly involved in the DPW subcommittee process. And as much as I'm a supporter and that group supported unanimously that that building needs replacement, there's no reason why the plan couldn't be for, payment and construction to start in 2029.
Knowing that they're going to come back and say there's cost escalations, et cetera, it's just making it more expensive. That's going to be the counter argument.
Well, it might be true, but by fixing the fuel depot and working on perimeter security, those two items were specifically brought to the fore to address the immediate issues that the site had so that more time could be spent sorting out the larger, bigger issue, which was less immediate. They
Great.
can continue to operate there till 2029 if they had to.
One concern we typically cite is the fact that compensation costs grow faster than 2.5%. And I kind of missed it on this slide.
That's fair. Just a second.
Just a side comment, really.
Just a second, please. Go ahead, Adam.
I forgot what That's so funny.
How about faster then, rather than structurally unsustainable?
I do want to try, Steve's right, I've not yet put the phrase structurally unsustainable in the presentation. I feel it needs to be in there somewhere.
I like to keep the top bullet point as the simpler idea on the smaller bullet point for the details, because the top is what people are going to remember first. But I guess it then depends what you're going to say on the bottom.
Want to say something?
All right.
Okay. Adam?
I honestly.
I'm sorry, I hate to do that to you, because if you had broken in, I'd have been the one who lost my thought.
Yeah, I totally get it. And I don't know why it went out of my head.
I cannot vote for a debt exclusion. I don't care how much we need it. You were taking,
Okay,
it's not just my tax bills that have gone up this year, it's my everything bills.
Yeah.
I mean, home insurance skyrocketing,
28%.
auto insurance skyrocketing.
I can't
has
comment, I have a
nothing-
16-year-old.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with my 16-year-old, actually. She added very little.
Parker did not.
Yeah, it ends up girls are cheap in that way. It's-
Okay.
In that particular item, girls are cheap.
Oh, yeah, that's the only way, I think.
Okay, so I hear you loud and clear on the debt exclusion. Can I jump to Mary Ann, who has her hand raised?
Yes, thank you. Just a quick question, is that adding the compensation increases are structurally unsustainable? And I'm thinking is that, was it mentioned in the near-term slide? I can't remember because that may be an opportunity for FinCom as you work with the town and the schools, that when the contracts are up. So I can't,
So
the
it's not-
present day or,
It's not as clearly laid out as it could be. I'll take that into consideration, but it's part and parcel of the cost-cutting initiative. Because we are all aware of the fact that if you do nothing, something like 90% of the revenue that's allowed to us through Prop 2.5 is already spoken for just by breathing. And we can't sustain that. So if I haven't put enough of a spotlight on it, I respect that statement, and I will come back and put a spotlight on it
and
on
I
the
think we
present day.
had spoken last time because just timing-wise, the 5 contracts on the town side are currently being negotiated. I think we touched upon that at the July 23rd meeting.
Go ahead.
We previously had mentioned it in areas talking about the current salaries. We could say something to the effect of current salaries, salary increases of greater than 4%, I think is how it has worked out in the past.
I think it needs to be in the a sub-bullet in here, and I'll figure out how to.
Well, just in the top one, current salaries already consume.
Yep.
You know that's going to make it into the final on the state.
It's not going to make it into the final. I mean, I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. Hey,
Didn't think you were.
last presentation had Steve's Happy Fun slide as an official slide, so we're good to go. Okay.
Like I said, this has made remarkable progress.
Okay. I should have just done that. Okay. I hear what you say, Greg, about wanting this growth, understanding possible consequences to be more future-looking.
Well,
It's-
yeah, here's a context and the reason why we didn't get data that we wanted. And I think we should expect, so I don't disagree with you on that. But part of the issue, and we've seen this in a couple recent articles in the Boston Globe, is that even though there were, I think, permits pulled to do construction down at Suffolk Downs, no construction was being done because the interest rates were too high and the housing costs were too high and the finances fell apart. So one of the reasons why it is hard to project this is that this is one of those things where the zoning allows something that financially is hard to predict in this, now, hopefully the interest rates come down, but the housing costs are still going to be through the roof. So
If you
it's-
don't put a
it is
range on it.
unclear. It's hard to predict in that kind of environment.
Okay, I'm not expecting anyone to hit the number with a pinpoint, bullseye dart accuracy, but if you don't even put a range on it, you're whistling past the graveyard.
Agreed. And so if you want, I will work on language, but I agree with you. This just needs to understand that some things are harder to predict than others.
Yes.
That's part of why I'd like to have the environmental impact in there, because that is much easier to predict. I mean specifically under the possible consequences.
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm just making notes for later. Okay. So do you want to make a comment about education as a priority, but it can't be the only industry in town? And then, again, just a comment that Minuteman shouldn't be ignored. And then recommendations. So this is actually, I'm going to need people's opinion on this one as well. In the past, we were pretty open about our free cash. We said 3 to 5%. I think we should change this slightly and say that 3% should be the target. That if it floats up a little, so be it, especially if you are purposely earmarking for a future item. I have no problem going above 3%. If you're saying 3% is what we're aiming for as the true emergency fund, but we know we're going to need X widget in 3 years, so I'd like to have us have a 0.5% or 0.2% or whatever in the bucket for future use. But I would only I would like us to only tolerate that if it's highlighted, predicted, and tracked. I'm also not against the concept of saying, if you wanted to do anything along those lines, that whatever the monies are, as soon as the monies really are certified free cash, that they immediately be transferred to a stabilization fund, where we've officially declared what we're having in that stabilization fund, why that stabilization fund exists. And then, go ahead, Steve.
I think you need a town meeting vote to move it into a stabilization.
That's fine, but as long as it's, as long as it becomes
Yeah.
the,
Earmarked.
the expectation or, you know, when ALG says, okay, and this year we're gonna, you know, the expectation is we're gonna have, or, oh gee, shock, we came in better than expected with the free cash, and rather than be at 3%, we're gonna be at 3.4%. But we know we got this thing coming up. I don't wanna leave it in free cash and have it be a puddle of money that grows into a pool. I'd rather have it be immediately moved out, or as immediately as possible, have it be moved out into the stabilization fund, or if it's specifically for a fire truck, then move it into the ambulance enterprise fund. You know, that type of thing where we're, and I've just looked at the slide here, I probably should have, put this, let's try this, from a flow perspective. Probably should have put it here, because at the bottom of the next point, I specifically call out that I want the town staff to identify in all the enterprise and revolving funds what they're planning to use it for, and how to make sure to drive those, to make sure that those do not grow in a vacuum, that they are funds that have been collected from either users or from the taxpayers writ large, and it should not just be something that's accounted for elsewhere and does not have the torch shown upon it on a regular basis. So I think I should put the reserve policy down below it'll feed in a little more easily. And again, I do think we need to have a conversation about both OPEB and Middlesex retirement, because neither of them are at 100% yet, correct? So I do think that this is significantly less focus on OPEB than we've had in the previous years. It's been half a slide in the previous years. So I'm narrowing it down now with the expectation of those who know, the select board and the school committee, they'll know what we're talking about here, and it's a fine talking point to anybody else, for anybody else. But and when it first shows up previous, I'll try and wordsmith it to make it a little more understandable. I believe that we need to give guidance that we're not going to be able to shoulder 8% tax increases. And if you think you're going to have a bad year, then you better have a couple of good years on either side of it to smooth things out. Either that or you need to figure out a way to come in at that 3.5% number every year, because we've had 2 8% increases in 5 fiscal years. It's getting intolerable. I mean, heck, a member of the public / committee stood up and told us just at the start of this meeting that it's getting intolerable. So we definitely need to, I think we need to set a, now, do we want to put a number to it? Or do we want to be a little less, less stringent and just say that we absolutely can't do 8% increases? And would you please look at a 5-year rolling average? Steve, I'm expecting you to counter me on this one and say no hard number.
No hard number.
Okay, I disagree with you.
I'm shocked. I think we can have an aspirational goal of setting one maybe next year, but I would like to see where things fall out on cost savings initiatives, see what happens, because that is the opportunity to change the slope of the curve. It only happens about once every 10 or 15 years in this town. Then I think it's perfectly reasonable to say, okay, now we can say that the next 3 to 5 years, the taxes should go up no more than X. But right now, we're kind of shooting blanks in terms of, I have no basis to make a recommendation other than this is what I want my taxes to go up, which, by the way, is almost zero.
I disagree. I think the populace has come to understand Prop 2.5 and know that it's not 2.5. They know, we've beaten this drum now for 10 years at least, that it's really 3% plus some capital overrides from time to time. That's not what we've lived through in the last couple of years. And so I think we need to figure out a way to say, we need to get back to that more predictable, or do we want to say something as point blank as, we should never be 10% off, 50% higher, or almost 50% higher, running running hotter than inflation on a 7-year period. I mean, there's 2 ways of saying it.
I don't mind picking a range of numbers. I just think if you pick it on the low side, you're anticipating something coming out of these cost savings initiatives. If you pick it on the high side, you're basically giving
it away.
Nothing will happen.
You're giving it away.
So it's often said that in a month we'll have better data, and you don't. But at least in a month from now, we might know what people are planning, or looking at anyway.
Okay. Okay. So clearly I have work to do on that bullet point. OPEB fine, tax increases got to work on. No debt, I think I heard resoundingly that we're prepared to present that to the select board this year. Reiterate the reserve policy.
29 is fine, because you already established the why.
Good. Fair enough. And then a reiteration that, oh, why did I do that? A reiteration that we want greater transparency on the different buckets of money. We want to know what we're saving for. I do allow for the possibility that we can, if we get back to a point where interest rates are truly advantageous, I'm not against the municipal side doing a packaging up of smaller capital budgets the way the school side did. And then that's it for the side that I have. I know Greg's going to send me his updates. I received some, I know, I'm not done yet. I've received some from Allison, and I fully trust that I'll be getting some comments from Christi. I would like to recommend that everyone, and this time I really will send out the presentation as fast as possible. I would like everyone to come with their edits for the next meeting. Greg, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just one last point. I think you had the right goal of keeping this under 10 slides. You now have this at 8 slides plus a thank you very much slide. And so I would strongly urge you to consider taking either slide 10 or 11 out of the appendix and move it up front, because it really anchors particularly our approach to capital expenditure. So wherever it fits in the right flow, it's the reason why fiscal year 29, or quote, when we get back to where we were in fiscal 2015, it explains that. And I think moving it up is advisable.
Very good. Christi?
I'm going to point out a typo because spell check won't catch it. Last bullet point, plan for future expenses now instead of paying as they crop up, not the crop up.
Thank you. So I've got about 5 bullets that need to be strongly fleshed out, which is significantly fewer than I was afraid was going to be the result of this meeting today. I would also like to say that I think this is the second very constructive conversation, second meeting in a row with a very constructive conversation on this point of view. And I'm super pleased that no debt exclusions till we get back to the level of fiscal year 15 on or around the fiscal year 29 is something that we as a committee stand behind.
I think you're going to have to change your font.
I will make it fit.
Okay.
I will make it fit. Okay, so I'm going to save this as a version 2.1 because I have to post all this stuff on the DocuShare. And then, provided tomorrow morning's meetings are as boring as I predict them to be, I will have a 2.2 out for you all to comment against. Okay. Are there any other comments on the point of view discussion at this time?
Where would you post the revisions?
I'm supposed to throw everything on the DocuShare, right?
Yep.
So I've got the 1.0 from last time as it was at the time that I walked out of the meeting of the last one, and then the 2.0 is what I sent to the committee a couple of days ago, and 2.1 is as of the end of this meeting today. Now, that said, I might need to call you and get the password again for DocuShare. Great, thank you. Okay. That takes us to committee business. We do not have any minutes at this time. That's my fault because I was supposed to reach out and ask if they were ready. Liaison reports. Before we jump into liaison reports, since Christi unfortunately was unable to make the last couple of meetings, we had held off on assigning the select board and the school committee because, nothing like saving the two biggest ones for last. It was a fierce arm wrestling battle, but Christi has decided to take the school committee, and I will take the select board. And I believe we have a suggestion of Dave Wellinghoff is going to be appointed to be the liaison for the revenue side, talking to the town. And I believe we have a new member who's about to get voluntold. Christi, would you like to see if anybody would like to step up, or if we should all take a step back for a liaison assignment?
I was hoping that we would once again establish a liaison to the water district.
And you wouldn't by any chance happen to have a member in mind that you would like to throw under the bus on this one?
Well, I was thinking maybe our newest member.
I should also inform the committee that we have a new associate member. I believe there's just been a paperwork delay. And I will also let you know that there is interest in another associate member spot. So Allison, if this is not something you are ready to take on at this time, we can see if we want to dump it on another, assign it on another associate member at a subsequent meeting.
They do not meet often. It's not a bad committee.
Do we know what night they meet, like regular time commitment? Okay,
mean,
that's the only
they-
thing that
They're not-
hinges on.
They usually meet on Mondays.
Okay,
And then they don't, the ones I've attended have not been overly long meetings, and they tend to meet on Zoom.
okay, tentative, yes, just got to check the calendar.
Thank you very much for stepping up. That's an action item for me to get you the meeting list.
And that revenue task force is who?
Dave Wellinghoff, as soon as he is properly ambushed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Teach him not to come.
He said he'd dial in. That's why I sent the link to all of the attendees, to all of the committee. Okay. Any liaison reports at this time? Scott?
Normally, this report's presented by Steve, but I'm Health Insurance Trust. They had a meeting on the 8th. They discussed a couple of things. One thing, they're waiting for the town to pay them $614,000 through the end of June, I believe. And they are they were going to look to try to change a billing process with, I think it was with, change the billing process so that they could get their estimates more in line with the invoices. I'm probably misinterpreting some of this stuff, but it was my first go at this.
And we thank you for stepping in since Steve was term limited. So thank you very much. Marianne,
Sunset.
term limited.
It is challenging to follow, so thank you. So I can give an update on the 618,000. So with the invoices that have come in, 2 payments have been made. One of them, if you folks recall, the Health Insurance Trust had requested a loan of $2 million. Of that $2 million, the town was responsible for $451,000, our share. So we made one payment of $178,000 in change towards that 451,000 based on our analysis of what the runoffs were going to be. In addition, a second payment was made because the August bill came in that represents July claims, and that payment was for approximately $154,000. So to Scott's point, I think at that point, just as recent as August 8th, more information has come in, and those two payments have been made since last Thursday, I believe, August 8th. And to your point about invoicing, is that because we're no longer self-insured and we're two separate entities, the invoicing will not just only go to the schools anymore, it has to go to the town and the school because we are two separate entities.
Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you.
While we have you on the.
Thank you.
While we have you on the microphone, do we have certified free cash?
We will not have certified free cash, not for, I don't want to say like a while, but we do not, but we're confident with our turn back, and I believe that we have said that our turn back would be under 1%, and we're confident with that. So John Mangiarotti will be giving an update to the select board and to folks soon, because we're just in the midst of closing fiscal year '24, but confident with the turn back.
North of 0, but south of 1%.
Absolutely, yes.
And we'll get a more accurate number the next select board meeting. I believe the next select board meeting is the 26th.
August 26th.
The 26th.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Greg, you had your hand up for liaison report.
Yeah, for the Economic Development Committee, they met last Friday. One of the things that they talked about was the new planning process that they're kicking off. They're at the very beginning phases to see what can be done to improve the economic development climate in Acton. And the stated goal, which I think is something that we can support, is right now the commercial side of things, contributes less than 10% to the overall tax base of the town. And to the extent that it can be increased, that lowers the burden on the residential property taxpayer. So they too will be doing a series of hearings. There's going to be a lot of people out talking to a lot of people this fall, but their particular focus will be on which businesses should we be encouraging to locate here? What can we be doing to try to make that process smoother, easier, et cetera? So that's one of the initiatives that they have. The second thing that this committee may want to take advantage of is they also had in basically the building inspector, person in charge of Ian Dawn, that was not Ian, it was, I forget his name. But he's been on the job for about 1.5 years. But one of the things that he shared with the EDC that will be music to our ears is that he has been in the process over the last year of creating a electronic database to begin monitoring building permits. And that will enable him to see trends, is it going up, down, sideways, or whatever. So one of the questions I asked him is, what are the trends you're seeing right now? And this goes back to my earlier comment that I made on our point of view. There's only 6 residential pieces of construction going on, one of which is at the end of Neshoba Road at the intersection of Cherokee, which
It was hydro seeded
happens to be
today.
halfway.
It was hydro
Yeah,
seeded.
which we,
Greg, it was hydro seeded today. It looks pretty good on the, it's going to be, all the big trucks are done. I know it's
Yeah,
important to
well,
you. It's 2
what's-
doors down from me and 2 doors down from you.
yeah, so it's halfway between us. But what stunned me was that there's only 5 others like it in Acton. In other words, one of the things that he talked about, which is, again, one of the things that makes it hard to predict what kind of zoning changes are likely to lead to, is that interest rates are still too high, construction costs are still too high. The only kind of home that builders can afford to build and make a profit on are the 6 that are being built now. And yes, hopefully the interest rates will come down after September, but the housing costs are still high. So there is a wealth of information year over year that is now available that wasn't available a year ago. And it can allow us to drill down and see what is happening and compare it to at least the previous year. The data doesn't go back farther than a year, but at least there's a year of data now.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
Greg, was it Ed Mullen possibly, the building commissioner who attended?
Yes, that's
Okay.
it. I'm sorry. I was looking at my notes and all I could find was the name of the intern who also made a report on what he had learned working for the EDC over the summer. So, yeah. But yes, that's who it was.
Thank you.
Without any other liaison reports, I'd remind the committee that our next meeting is scheduled for the 27th. The next meeting of the school committee is the 22nd. There is a request for the first ALG meeting of the year. Unfortunately, we're going to have to see if that can, if one of the members can attend remotely, or if we're going to have to pick a different date for that. If a remote attendance is available, I'm going to throw this to you and put you on the spot. If it was in the morning on the 5th, would you be able to attend via Zoom?
I'm in Texas for a system implementation all-day meeting for basically like the whole time I'm down there.
6 a.m. Central? What time we start? 7 a.m. If it could be done by Zoom, could you make it? Or should I ask for it to be rescheduled?
When I was in Texas, we started our day around 7:30 meeting. So I don't know. I could probably I'm sure I could be online from 6 to 7, but I don't know.
I'll ask if we can have it moved.
All right, yeah, I apologize for that. Just,
That's okay. I'm
last
usually the one out of town. I know what it feels like.
yeah, it's my last
Go ahead, Mary Ann.
travel, I think.
I think John had also mentioned September 4th. Is that also a date
4th and
that's?
5th. 4th and 5th, he's out of town.
Oh, both 4th and 5th you're out. Okay. All right, thank you.
We'll have to see if that can get done, or if it can only be done. Do you have a preference, the 4th or the 5th, for first thing in the morning?
The 4th Tuesday? I forget which is which.
4th is a Wednesday, the 5th is a Thursday.
Yeah, so Wednesday's the all-day meeting. Thursday, I'm in meeting in the morning, flying out in the afternoon, and I'm flying in on Tuesday.
Do you have a preference for Wednesday or Thursday early in the morning?
I would say Wednesday.
That's what I will propose, and if we can't make it, we'll have to reschedule.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wednesday. Okay. Those are all the points I had. Allison, I look to you, please.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Is that what you're looking for?
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Non-debatable. Let's take a roll call vote. Greg says aye. Thank you very much.
Aye.
Everybody else? Aye.
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 Very good. Thank you very much. Have a great night.